How's everybody doing today? My name is Jalens Washington. I'm a junior at Tuskegee University in psychology major. I'm taking this class today, or this year, called social problems. One of the big topics we can talk about in social problems is marriage, remarriage, divorce, and how that affects our African American community and us as a whole. And so one of the big things we had to do is go and interview people and find out how do the older generation feel about things like marriage and feel about things like love, is love enough, feel about things like divorce. So with that being said, I went out and I talked to a couple different people, some people from Tuskegee, some people from Auburn, some people from Florida, and just got to find out what how they feel about things like love. So there was a multitude of questions that I asked. Um, I'm gonna allow everybody to their answer one by one. So the first question that was asked was, what does love mean to you?
Hi, my name is B. I have been married for 20 years. I'm a mother of two sons.
Okay, so with being married, the first question I have for you is what is your definition of love?
The definition of love in a marriage, it's not the heart's roses candy answer. To me, love is more about respect. I don't think that love is a good enough reason to get married. I think that it's important to, yes, have a romantic interest in somebody, but ultimately, how I would define love in a marriage is the alignment of core values with the person that I'm choosing to build a life with.
Definition of love is simply commitment.
My definition of love is the biblical definition of love. And the biggest part of love, I think, is love is unconditional and love covers.
What is my definition of love? So, my definition of love is that strong emotion that we as people feel that connects us to other people for periods of time. So, you would have to, you value the person, you support the person, you admire, you adore, all of these things kind of fits into what I define as love. Now, obviously, you do have different kinds of love. You have that romantic love, the platonic love, the familial love. And in essence, all of those things, the support, the value, all of that fits into those categories. But uh, those are the things that I believe define love, right?
Added on to this question, now that we know what they feel love is, we then ask if they think that love is the only thing that you need for a successful relationship or is there more to that? With that being said, we also added on to that question with if love is not everything, or even if love is everything, do you think there's any key factors or successful things you can do to make your marriage more successful?
I don't think that love is enough to keep people in a marriage, though, because marriage itself is a lot of hard work, a lot of hard work. Um, some of the things that I think is helpful to keep a marriage together is communication. Communication is key because you can't make it without knowing what your partner is thinking, and your partner can't make it without knowing what you are thinking. You have to talk through the disagreements. You have to talk through those fights and never go to bed angry. So that's a big one. You also have to acknowledge that even though we are together in a marriage, that we are still separate people too. So you have to balance between that time that you spend together and then the time that you also spend apart doing your own thing, because it sounds weird, but I think together, a lot of togetherness, it can kind of get a little old, and it can kind of drive you crazy if you're constantly around that person all the time and you're kind of neglecting everything that you enjoy or everything that you do. And it's very true that you get, you and your partner can do things together, but sometimes, I just kind of want to be off doing my thing and then he does his thing. So that kind of helps us. It gives us that separation but togetherness, if that makes sense, right? So I just think, again, communication and then knowing how to balance that time that you spend together. And if children are involved, obviously, you definitely want to make sure that everybody is doing their fair share with the parenting and the raising of children, because children are a lot of hard work as well. So it's just all of those things. Like, you have to be a team. You have to take on these things together, make these decisions together. So again, communication mainly is the biggest thing that I think you need to keep a marriage together.
And some keys to a successful marriage um, is endurance, patience, humility, and grace.
Yeah, I think that my keys to a success relationship is when you guys are equally yoked, like you are building on the same foundation, you have the same beliefs in what this is, um, and the things that he just said, humility and grace.
Okay, so with you saying that you don't think love is enough for a marriage, what do you think are other key factors that contribute to a successful marriage?
Respect is a huge thing. Common core values, people change. No one's going to be the same as they were 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And so to marry somebody because you expect them to be just as they are, I think is very short-sighted. I think that's how you end up hearing people say we fell out of love or things just didn't work out anymore. So I feel like your core values, specifically how you feel about maybe your faith, how you feel about finances, like-mindedness in your goals in life. If one of you is more driven in an area and the other of you is not, that may be an issue. And also financially, to have the same mindset and values, because those are the core values of who you are. And then also things like, for instance, your morals, whether you feel that, say, lying or stealing is okay, and then also what expectations that you have out of a marriage partnership. And a lot of that's modeled from maybe what you've seen in society or your parents, things like that. But we go into these relationships with the expectation, and when they're not met, that's when people become dissatisfied. So I feel that the biggest thing is you just have to have an alignment of whatever core values are true to you, those things, those parts of you that you cannot, will not, refuse to change. Those things need to be compatible, not necessarily be alike or identical, but compatible.
Thank you.
Everybody that I asked had such great answers. The next question that we went into was, how do they feel on things like remarriage, divorce, cohabitation, and things of that nature? Do they feel like situations like that lead to teenage pregnancies or violence? And also, how do they feel marriages have changed from now versus how they were when they were growing up?
Okay, my next question is going to be how do you personally feel about situations like divorce, remarriage, cohabitation, and things of that nature?
Well, divorce happens. I definitely wouldn't recommend anyone stay in an abusive or toxic relationship. But I think because people go into marriage so easily with these unrealistic expectations that they see in either movies or social media, that they then become disenchanted and dissatisfied. And so I do believe that contributes to the divorce rate. I also think finances contribute greatly to the divorce rate. That being said, I don't shun people who have been divorced. I think that it's very brave sometimes to leave a relationship. Maybe the comforts and the stability that one has, even though all things might not be bad. And at the end, it may be tearing apart a family, but sometimes those families cannot survive. For instance, I'm a child whose parents divorced. My father was physically abusive to my mother and would have possibly been physically abusive to me. So I'm thankful that my mother had the courage to leave that relationship, although it then put her in the position of being a single parent. She did it for the right reasons, for our safety and protection. And so I do understand that things happen. Sometimes people mature, maybe the decision they made at 18, or they got married out of societal norms or expectations of this is the type of person you should be with, and then at some point they grow into themselves more and realize that this is not who I want to be with. This person and I are not aligned, and they choose to end that. I do appreciate when people make that decision prior to having children, because then it gets a lot more sticky. It's hard to truly separate from a person when you have a child together. I don't think single parenting is for the faint of heart. When done right, single parenting is in some instances doubly hard as parenting in a two-parent household, if both parents are active in that household. But that being said, I applaud single parents. Again, I was raised by a single mother. In regards to cohabitation, I think that people who truly have a desire to be married to the right person and they cohabitate, I think that it slows down the timeline to marriage, because everything is so easy and accessible and right there. That there's not a rush or push or desire. So you see people having families, putting themselves together financially, buying a home together, buying cars together, but they say it's just a sheet of paper and they won't take that next step to actually get married. But when they do break up, they essentially have to go through almost a divorce to separate themselves financially. They still go through the same amount of emotions, but it's harder because in the instance of a divorce, there's something to mourn. But in the instance of a cohabitation relationship that has pretty much almost mirrored a marriage relationship, and that being the time they spend together, there's still something to mourn, but it's not the same way. I think it's very dangerous because people get lulled into a sense of comfort, and then 5, 10, 15 years later, they're still just boyfriend and girlfriend. If that person were to die financially, the husband, wife, their quote unquote spouse is left in a weird position, financially, emotionally, legally, things of that nature. So I don't recommend it. I think that it just slows down the process. If you're not sure about the person, then live separately. When you come together, but I think it creates confusion, and then the children are somewhat confused as well. And that's just my opinion.
Thank you. When it comes to things like divorce and cohabitation, do you think that violence in the household or teenage pregnancies have any type of correlation towards those type of situations?
I think that we have to first define the moral standard. And so my standard, and I'm not saying that I'm perfectly right, but my standard is I like my household to be aligned. Just like the old nursery rhyme, first comes, quote unquote, however we define love, then marriage, and then children. When you have the expectation for your children to do things that you are not doing, you become hypocritical, saying, do as I say and not as I do. You're modeling what I consider to be out of alignment of how you're living your lifestyle. So then it's very hard to put your foot down or to hold a standard or say, be at home at a certain time, or these are our expectations of you, because what they're seeing in their parents, or maybe not even both parents, but maybe a parent and a boyfriend, girlfriend, is not, quote unquote, what some might call right. So then it becomes, why is it okay for you to do this, but not okay for me to do this, and becomes a slippery slope. So I do think it contributes to it, but my feeling has always been that the detrimental to society has been the destruction of the family. That when you take that father, mother, masculine, feminine energy to balance, to nurture, to raise, to provide, to support, to care for, to encourage, to hold to a standard, to discipline. And discipline isn't just physically beating a child, I'm not recommending that, but discipline is teaching those children, then that's when you're going to start having an issue. That's when you start to see things like disrespectful people who don't understand boundaries, people who then we launch these mini adults, these mini humans into the world, thinking that everything is going to go their way, or thinking that the rules don't apply to them, because maybe sometimes that's what they're seeing at home. So I do think that it contributes to it, but at the end of the day, we still have to make a decision. I don't think anyone intends to get pregnant by accident. Those things happen. But it's how we deal with them. Do we make it so comfortable and okay that it happens again and again and again, or do we then help that person to rise to the role of motherhood, fatherhood, financially, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and in doing that, the child parent has a chance to grow, mature, learn that while their child is not a mistake, that they did contribute to what may be in the short term a hardship for them, because parenting is a challenge when done well. And so to put that type of pressure on an 18, 19, 20-year-old who at this point financially may still is kind of at that college age, to where how much income are they able to earn and create and to provide, they're going to need some support. So I'm not a fan of throwing them out to the wolves and, you made your bed, lie in it. But I do think that there needs to be a healthy level of accountability and responsibility, so that that child parent can grow into being a fully functioning parent, one who isn't resentful of their child. I applaud them for taking the tough road of having their child and then not using that as an excuse, but to then continue to go on. It just takes balance and adjustment. But I do think that, yes, it probably in some ways does contribute. But at the same token, I know people who came from two-parent households who then found themselves in a situation to where they had a child and they rose to the occasion beautifully.
Another question I have is, in the African American community, how do you feel marriages have changed from when you were growing up versus how they are now?
I think that people are getting married because it's cute and it's fun, and they don't understand that there's a wedding, which is one day, great, huge party, and then there's a marriage. And I think that oftentimes we get, we're trying to keep up with these people and watch this person, and you see this lifestyle, and you see snippets and highlights of lifestyle, of the things that people put out, what I would call their representative of how they live. And we tend to want to do that. I've seen people spend, $200,000-$300,000 on a wedding that lasted 8 months. It's because they focus so much on the one day versus the long term. People change. And again, that goes back to how do we align our core values, and finances are a huge thing in that. But I think that people, and maybe even to a fault, sometimes people stay together, quote unquote, for the children, because they saw the value in having two parents in the household to support, to provide for. And again, I don't condone staying in an abusive relationship, but sometimes people quit too easily. We fell out of love. We grew apart. It just wasn't working anymore. He changed, she changed. Well, yes, because the same person I was 20 years ago, I'm not that person today. And so giving that other person the space to change should be allowed. Changing but still align with their core values versus changing completely who they are, two different things. And some of that is just not being honest up front. I do think that this generation is probably in some ways better about saying what you want and what you need, and I think that's a very good thing, and I don't think that should change. But I think that people should enter that earlier in the timeline, instead of waiting until 6 months post I do. Have those conversations. I don't feel this generation is afraid to tackle tough topics. I think that they need to tackle the tough topics earlier, so that you don't get down the aisle 2 or 3 children later and now you decide this isn't working. He's toxic. I want to move on. I got to live my best life. I have to, look out for me first. Do those things before. Have those tough conversations before. I also think that people in this generation are maybe more, to a detriment, open-minded about some things, specifically open marriages. I think people tend to start doing that to be cool because it's the it thing to do, because that way you can keep your spouse but still have some spice and things like that. That just tells me maybe you're not ready to be married. And again, have that conversation before. But to throw something of that magnitude onto a person after they said I do is one of those, they've changed and that's not a change, that disaligns with my core values. So I think in some ways this generation would do better about not staying in abusive relationships or toxic relationships. But I also think at some point this generation maybe has a more loose value set of what it truly means to be married. There should be a difference between married life and single life, but I see a lot of people trying to blur that line, and I think that's where people are getting in trouble. Plus, everything is on social media for people to see, track, follow, like, comment, and share. And I think that I'm very glad that my entire life is not online.
As far as divorce and remarriage and cohabitating, all that kind of stuff, I don't really have an opinion on it. It's not something that plan on or ever planned on. Um, Support or not support, quite frankly. I think when I grew up, um, divorce was starting to kind of pick up speed as far as in America and in the black community. As far as remarriage, although I did see that a little bit when I was growing up, but I don't think many people did it. I think a lot of people were kind of one and done for various reasons.
Um, I would say, personally, when we got married, we decided that that's not an option. So that wasn't a word that we said as far as like divorce or anything like that. We knew that this is a difficult endeavor. So we didn't say that. Background wise, you know, your grandmother's been married 5 or 6 times. My parents were divorced, and the way they handled it was probably ideal. I never saw any arguing or anything like that. I think that compared to now, I think in general, in the United States, not just in the black community, there is kind of like a challenge towards family, because family is your core of your community and your values of the country. So family is very important, whether you are divorced or remarried or married again or you're not married at all. I think family is core and key, and the rest of it has to do with people's individual religious beliefs on what they feel marriage is.
How do I feel about remarriage, divorce, cohabitation, and single parenting? Well, I don't really have any negative thoughts about that because I'm not one to judge anyone's situation. And sometimes these things may just be for the best. I'm a firm believer that um, people are in your life for a season sometimes, and sometimes that may just be very true with a person you decided to marry, because it's very easy for that romantic love to turn into that platonic love. And sometimes you see it happen, but I think that a lot of people, as long as people can remain cordial and friends and co-parent well and communicate well, I don't really have any negative thoughts about that. And on another note, my parents are divorced. They divorced when I was in high school, and they still remain friends even though they fell out of love. You know, that romantic love, and she just didn't feel like it was the right situation for my mom. Didn't feel like the situation was right for her anymore. She and my dad decided to split ways, but they still remained friends all the way up until my father passed. So it's just those things. It's just very dependent, but I don't have any negative feelings about that. Now, do I believe that those things are correlated with violence and teen pregnancy? No, not really. A lot of those things are very situation dependent, because, like, violence and teenage pregnancy can come from, can happen in a two-parent home, you know, people who have both of their parents who have healthy marriages. So sometimes it just depends. However, though, um, if those homes are broken, and there is no love, or there's just a lot of negativity in a household, that could potentially lead to things like that. So I don't, but overall, I don't really think it's correlated with the violence in teenage pregnancy. Now, how marriage is looked at now versus when I was growing up. So today, what I admire about um, the upcoming generation, well, the people are my age and a little bit younger, are that people aren't always tied to labels. So you don't have to be married to be happy. Um, and some people are realizing that marriage is, sure, it's fun, I love it, but some people don't, and they're speaking up and moving out of those things that aren't in their best interest, because sometimes marriages, again, they don't work, and people aren't afraid to just call it quits when they see it's not working after they've tried multiple things. Versus when I was growing up, a lot of the older people my grandparents and aunts and everything like that, they would stay with their partner if they were struggling in this marriage for just different reasons, whether it's for the kids or if it's for stability. A lot of these things they would stay for the wrong reasons. A religion is definitely one, because they don't believe in divorce, even though it can be a totally broken marriage. So a lot of people tend to not want to explore the remarriage, divorce, all of this other stuff. And it's just, I think it's a generational thing, honestly. And I believe it just wasn't healthier. But today, I think people are a little bit more in tune of what they need for self peace. I think.
I think that one is a decline in just moral values. And if we're talking specifically in the African American community, I don't think it's even African American. I think it's in American society. But I think there were some institutional seeds that were sown in, probably the late 60s, early 70s with drug and alcohol into the Black community. Violence and crime sparked by kind of economic disparity. All of that stuff kind of helped kind of fuel the grow the seed of kind of broken homes. And once those once those families start to break down, you started seeing the communities to break down, which started kind of the revolving door of kind of a generational broken family in the Black communities.
I think there's always been an attack on the Black families, starting in slavery with the Willie Lynch letters, intentionally changing the roles of the Black families, where you see this dominant woman, and she is like keeping her man or son soft or quiet to protect their family. So you see that also in the 70s with the Welfare Act. You couldn't get welfare if a man was in the home. So that was another attack on the Black family. Now, just because a man is not in the home doesn't mean that the family isn't intact.
The next question that was asked was kind of a personal question. The question we asked them was, do they think that religion has anything to do, or actually the absence of religion has anything to do with the decline in marriages or successful marriages today? Um, this is a question that I thought was going to be the hardest people to answer because it kind of tugged at their opinions, which is yeah.
Um, I don't think the decline of religion in relationships is causing troubles in marriages, because not everybody is religious. I've seen multiple couples that have that are not very religious have the happiest marriages ever, and then on the other hand, I've seen completely religious people who are the most broken. So that I don't. Mm, no, I don't really believe religion plays a whole part in that. Um, but if that's what other people believe, I'm not gonna knock that. So, but in my opinion, I just don't think religion has a part to do with the decline in marriages. Again, I just think it's people being more in tune to what they're feeling, um, what's best for them, and taking that and putting it forefront.
I don't think that it has to do with a lack of religious meaning or morality. I do think that we're saying America as if it's a whole people that are homogenous, and that's not true. I think there are cultures that have very strong marriages and use marriage differently. I think that personally, most of my friends that are married have been married for 15 and 20 years. I don't have any friends that have gotten divorced. So I don't think this is like a as America thing or anything like that.
So, with your faith system, whether that's Christianity, whether that is of a Muslim faith, whether you worship whatever, whoever, however you worship, one of the commonalities is that there are typically a set standard of expectations and behaviors, those core values. So in this country, specifically in the Southeast, it is broadly Christian. I live in the Bible Belt. That being said, there are a certain set of things, do's and don't do's, 10 commandments, things that are agreed upon practices of what's acceptable and not acceptable. I do feel like regardless of whatever your faith system is, when you move away from those things, then there's a lot more interpretation. And in that interpretation, I do think that people find themselves straying away, and in straying away, it does put a strain on marriage. So yes.
The last question that we asked them was, as African Americans, what are the things that we can do to help ourselves, even though there are many racial factors going on in the world, what are things that we can do to help ourselves have better relationships, better marriages, and better families?
As an African American woman, one of the things that I would say that I see online is a lot of African American males seem to almost take a position of pride to say, I don't date the women from my race because we're too attitudinal, we're too this, we're too that. And I say to those men, on behalf of whoever hurt you, I'm truly sorry. I think that people should love who they love. I think that I can look at a man of my skin tone and recognize that he may be in love with a woman who does not look like me, and I'm okay with that. In regards to the African American community, I feel like there needs to be a lot more uplifting and encouragement. I think that there needs to be a reevaluation of child discipline. I think that especially in the South, there are still some holdovers from a slave mindset that sometimes impact how we raise and parent our children. For instance, I was raised by in addition to being raised in the South primarily, I was also raised by a drill sergeant in the United States Army. So I grew up in a very strict environment. There wasn't a lot of leeway for how I thought or for me to formulate an opinion. So I think that we as a people need to give our children the space to explore, to ask questions, to learn how to do it in a respectful manner, to not just take authority carte blanche, but to say, let me evaluate this. And also to understand why. That's something that we work to do in our household is, I don't want to just tell my children, do X, Y, and Z. I want to show them, here's what I'm doing and here's why I'm doing it and here's why I'm suggesting that you do it this way, because it's going to give the highest chance for a beneficial outcome. But it's not the only way. And sometimes I tell them, this is the way I do it. Feel free to do it another way. The way that you're thinking about doing it will probably get you to the same spot, but it definitely won't hurt you. So give it a try. I don't think that as a child, I had a lot of opportunity to ask why or to give a lot of input. And so I think that in some ways that silenced me. And so I think that we as an African American community are probably slow adopters in allowing our children to be more free in questioning. You can question authority respectfully. I think that's a healthy thing to be able to do and to be able to formulate your own opinions, even much so with religion. I don't want my children to share the same faith system just because I share this, I have it, and I've told you in this house you must. I want them to have a personal relationship with Christ and then choose that for themselves. Now, will I model that? Yes. But I'm not going to say, just take it for face value. I want you to question, and in that questioning, you build confidence in who you are so that you can stand on your own 2 feet, because I think it's very scary to send a child out to the world to where you've always told them do A, B, and C, and then say, now you're 18 and I expect you to think for yourself, and we never give them opportunities to fail along the way. So I think that what I would like to see us do as a community is to give our children the space to try, fail, and adjust at the smaller things, and of course guide them along the bigger things, and to never just say, you're on your own, I'm done with you. I also think that in our community, there's a tendency to say, you're 18, you're on your own, go live your life. If my children are still, post-college and they want to live at home, because hey, really financially, that's kind of a smart thing to do. We won't shun them for saying, hey, let me stay at home a few more years. Now, will we give them some responsibilities along the way? Will we make them, quote unquote, maybe pay a rent or something to get in the habit and then give them the money back when they move out? By all means. But I think that we as a community need to understand parenting doesn't end at age 18, that parenting is a lifelong thing, and not just the emotional part of parenting, the physical part of parenting, the sometimes the service part of parenting still needs to be done. And slowly take off the training wheels instead of letting it be a, live under my house, my rules, and then 18, go live on your own. How come you don't know what to do? I think there needs to be a more gradual ascension into adulthood and a lot more support in that young adulthood, that 21 to 26 range, to where you're still trying to figure things out. Your brain is not fully developed until you're 25. And so, yes, adult children are going to need a little bit more guidance along the way. And I think that as a community, we maybe have not embraced that concept holistically yet.
Thank you.
All right. And the final question, what can Black people do better what can Black people do better in their family dynamics to reserve their marriages? Well, one, talk about your feelings. Understand that it's not taboo. It shouldn't be taboo to talk about how you're feeling or express those feelings and be vulnerable, because a lot of the times I've seen a lot of the male partners not want to express how they're feeling a lot of the times, or are afraid to be vulnerable or even cry or show a lot of emotion. And in the Black homes, I think a lot of that is frowned upon, especially if people are expressing mental health things or their depression, and people just end up suppressing that, and that can actually be very, very harmful. So I think that is what we as the Black community should be able to do. We should be able to express our feelings, go to therapy, talk these things out with professionals if we're feeling some kind of way, if we're feeling that depression, if we're feeling that anxiety, we're feeling that anger. It's like all of these things, they don't need to be bottled up, because if we continue to bottle those things up, that's where you get all these broken homes and the infidelities and the marriages, and you don't recognize if this marriage is working or not after everything you've tried, if you tried anything at all. So it's just those things that I believe that we can do as the Black community to help reserve our marriages a bit more. But that's all I have, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak and answer those questions. Have a good day.
I think that families, it kind of goes back to, kind of a grandparents' generation and great grandparents' generation. I think that Black families should just start with your own door, start with what's going on inside your household, work to build a great example of a family and what you see as a family for your household and generations to come. And then, encourage your neighbor and help build up your neighborhoods and your local communities, etc., and be an example to the people, friends and family that you kind of impact just by the example of how you live your life, how you build your home, whether you're with your spouse, with your children, etc., with your devotion to your community, uplifting each other. That's where I think that they should start.
I think that the nuclear family has to live in a larger context of a broader community family. I think that marriage is tough, and people that are newly married think it's just them against the world, and that's not really the way to do it. Like, you actually don't know how to do it. You need other wives and other husbands and people that are successful in their marriage to help guide you through this situation. So your family lives in a broader community of family, which I think is how our grandparents had it. They lived with their brothers and their cousins and their aunts, and that also held them accountable to their larger family. So we need to expand our nuclear family to the broader.
All in all, I think it was really good interviews and really good questions to ask. Marriage has been something that has been changing a lot over the years. A lot of people in my generation don't really look at marriage as something that needs to be done anymore. It's more like something that's cool to do. Um, I think personally, I would like to get married, but I don't really know how to really work on a marriage. So I think the best thing that we can do personally is ask our older generations what they think about marriage, what they think about stuff.